You're standing in your kitchen at 11 at night, staring at a login screen that will not let you in. There's no help desk. There's no password reset. There's no human being left on Earth who can get you back into that account, because the company that built it folded 2 years ago and took its servers with it. That feeling in the back of your skull right now is not a modern feeling. It is one of the oldest feelings our species has. For most of human history, it did not apply to a streaming account. It applied to how to make the thing that stopped your city being burned to the waterline. Today we're going through 10 ancient technologies that people say we still can't explain. And I'm going to do something almost nobody doing this list does. At the end of every single one, I'm giving you a verdict. Because these lists cheat. They blend 3 completely different things together and present all of it as equally spooky. Some of these were genuinely mysterious and have now been solved with real, published research, mostly in the last 20 years. Some are still right now genuinely unsolved. And some were never mysterious at all. The mystery got invented later, by people selling something. By the end, you'll be able to sort any ancient mystery you ever hear into one of those 3 in about 10 seconds. And the pattern connecting all 10 is going to say something genuinely uncomfortable about you and about the device you're watching this on. Stick around for that. Number 1. The Antikythera Mechanism. 1901. Greek sponge divers get shoved off course by a storm and end up anchored over a Roman-era wreck near the island of Antikythera, at a depth that was, with the equipment they had, a genuinely reasonable way to die. They go down anyway. They haul up bronze statues, marble pottery, and one lump of corroded bronze that absolutely nobody cares about. That lump gets crated, shipped to Athens, and left in a museum for months while everyone fusses over the statues. Then it cracks open on its own as it dries out. And inside there are gear teeth. Precision cut. Interlocking. Inside a 2,000-year-old rock that came off the bottom of the Mediterranean. A century of study, including full CT scanning, confirmed the fragments hold at least 30 bronze gears cut to fractions of a millimeter. It tracked the sun and moon. It predicted eclipses years ahead. It counted down the Olympic Games. And it modeled the moon's irregular orbit, the way it visibly speeds up and slows down across a month, using a brilliant pin-and-slot trick where one gear sits off-center from another and drags it unevenly. Nothing else this mechanically complex appears anywhere on Earth for another 1,400 years. It's a laptop in a Viking grave. In 2021, a team at University College London led by Tony Freeth published the first complete computer model of the front of the device, matching every surviving fragment and every relevant word of the inscriptions carved on the thing itself. Nothing left over. Nothing fudged. Then in 2024 it got absurd. Graham Wohn and Joseph Bay Wiley at Glasgow, who normally hunt gravitational waves, pointed that statistical machinery at the tiny holes in one broken ring. The answer came back 354. Not 365, which would be a solar calendar. 354 is a lunar year. Drilled by hand to an average error of 28 thousandths of a millimeter. But here's the detail that gets skipped every single time. It wasn't found displayed in a shrine as somebody's priceless treasure. It was in the cargo hold. It was freight. Which means it wasn't a miracle built once by a lone genius who died with the secret. It was a product. Somebody was making these. So how many more are lying on the floor of the Mediterranean right now? Verdict: mostly solved and probably not even rare. Number 2. Greek fire. Around 672, an architect named Kallianios flees Syria ahead of the advancing Arab armies and arrives in Constantinople carrying a formula. A few years later, at the end of the First Great Arab Siege in 678, the Byzantines sail out badly outnumbered and spray the attacking fleet with liquid fire from bronze tubes mounted on their bows. The fire keeps burning on the open sea. It sticks to hulls. It follows sailors into the water when they jump overboard to escape it, which is the detail that turns a weapon into a legend. The fleet is destroyed. For the next 775 years, Greek fire keeps saving the empire, so feared that enemy fleets turned around on the rumor of it. Nobody knows what it was made of. And I want to be precise about how strong that statement is. Not we have competing theories, nobody knows. The formula was restricted to one family and a handful of imperial officials and deliberately never written down in full, specifically so it couldn't leak. It worked. When Constantinople fell in 1453, it didn't get captured or copied or sold. It stopped existing. And the real problem isn't missing paperwork. It's a contradiction. The stuff has to be sticky enough to cling to wood and skin, fluid enough to pump as a controlled jet through a bronze siphon without clogging or exploding in the tube, and volatile enough to ignite instantly and keep burning on seawater. Those three fight each other. Sticky things don't pump. Things that pump don't cling. Every modern reconstruction nails one or two. Not one has ever nailed all three. Verdict still lost permanently and honestly respect. Number 3. Damascus Steel. Blacksmiths across the early Islamic world produced blades from a raw material called woots, imported from southern India, and those blades were absurd. They held an edge that chipped European swords. The surface carried a rippling water-like pattern nobody could fake. And the stories, which are stories, describe them slicing a silk scarf falling through the air under its own weight. Here's the paradox that made this a real scientific problem. Woots has an unusually high carbon content. High carbon steel is hard and hard steel is brittle, and brittle blades shatter. These didn't. So what was holding it together? In 2006, Mariahn Rye Bold and colleagues at Dresden dissolved a fragment of a genuine antique blade in acid and put what was left under an electron microscope. They found carbon nanotubes. Actual carbon nanotubes wrapped around and protecting nanowires of CME-N-tite. We discovered carbon nanotubes in 1991 and called it cutting-edge nanotechnology. Medieval blacksmiths were forging them into swords 800 years earlier. But that's the what. The how is still open. It depended on trace impurities in one specific ore, probably vanadium, reacting inside a heating and cooling sequence smiths carried entirely in their hands. Never in writing. The technique vanishes around 1750, and here's the part that gets me. Nobody lost a recipe card. The Indian ore ran dry or the trade route shifted, and because not one person alive understood that the trace chemistry of that ore was the actual secret, there was nothing anyone knew to preserve. The recipe kept being followed correctly right up until it stopped working, and nobody could say why. Verdict half solved. We know what it is. We still can't make it. Number 4. Roman concrete. The Pantheon's dome was poured about 125 AD. 19 centuries later, it is still the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth. Still standing. Still open. There are people inside it right now photographing the ceiling. Meanwhile, the concrete we pour for bridges and parking structures starts falling apart inside 50 years, and we spend billions annually patching it. So why is the 2,000-year-old version better than ours? For decades, everyone examining Roman concrete noticed small white chunks of lime scattered through it. And for decades, the consensus was that these were flaws. Sloppy mixing. Careless work. The Romans, we assumed, were just a bit rubbish at stirring. In 2023, a team led by Admir Mahsich at MIT published in Science Advances and turned that inside out. Those chunks are lime-clasts and they are not flaws. They are the entire point. The Romans mixed reactive quicklime indirectly at high temperature instead of slaking it first. That leaves brittle lime-clasts distributed through the concrete. When a crack forms, it runs straight through them. Water gets in, as water always does, dissolves the fractured clast into a calcium-saturated solution, and that solution flows along the crack and recrystallizes. The crack seals itself. No inspection. No repair crew. No budget meeting. And in their marine concrete, it goes further. Seawater, the exact thing that destroys modern marine concrete by rusting out the steel inside it, reacts with the volcanic ash the Romans used and grows new interlocking mineral crystals. Their seawalls got stronger the longer the sea attacked them. So why isn't every bridge built this way? The specific volcanic ash is expensive and geologically local, and self-healing chemistry interacts badly with modern steel reinforcement. Verdict solved. We spent decades staring directly at the answer and filing it under sloppy workmanship. Number 5. The Nazca Lines. Somewhere between 500 BC and 500 AD, the Nazca people of southern Peru walked into the desert and started drawing. Not small drawings. A spider stretching 50 meters. A monkey with a spiraling tail over 90 meters across. Hummingbirds, condors, straight lines running for kilometers. Over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 animal and plant designs spread across 400 square kilometers. They made them by scraping away the dark reddish pebbles covering the surface to reveal the pale ground underneath. The desert is one of the driest and least windy places on the planet, which is why 2,000 years of weather has not erased them. New ones still turn up. A cat figure was found during conservation work in 2020, having sat there unnoticed for 2 millennia. Now here's what you've been told. That they are only visible from the air, that the Nazca had no aircraft and therefore something very strange is going on. And that is where this one falls apart because the premise is just wrong. The lines are perfectly visible from the foothills surrounding the plain. You do not need to be in the sky. You need to be standing slightly uphill. And we know roughly how they did it because archaeologists found the equipment. Wooden stakes are still in the ground at the ends of some lines. Stake, rope, and a scaled-up sketch gets you a figure this size, and experiments have reproduced it. That doesn't make it unimpressive. Doing that across kilometers of open desert by hand with that consistency is genuinely remarkable. It just isn't unexplained. Verdict: never a mystery. The mystery was manufactured by removing the hills from the story. Right. 5 down. The next 5 are quicker but do not switch off because 2 of them are the best entries on this list. Number 6. The Baghdad Battery. A clay jar about 2,000 years old found near Baghdad, holding a copper cylinder wrapped around an iron rod. Fill it with vinegar and it produces a small current. Ancient electricity, allegedly, 1800 years before Volta. Except archaeologists overwhelmingly reject that, and not out of stubbornness. There is not one single electroplated object known from that place and period. Not one. If you invent electroplating, you use it, and you leave evidence. There isn't any. The jar is also plugged with bitumen, sealing it permanently shut, and a battery needs its electrolyte topped up. Sealing a battery closed is like welding your fuel cap on. And the answer is right there in the archaeology. Near-identical vessels turn up at Saelosha on the Tigris, used for storing sacred scrolls. Parchment around a metal core sealed in a sleeve plugged with bitumen against damp. The parchment rotted away, leaving faintly acidic residue, which is exactly what makes copper and iron produce a trace current when a modern person adds vinegar. You can also power a bulb with a potato. That doesn't make your dinner a battery. Verdict: never a mystery. Number 7. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. 7 meters of solid wrought iron standing in open weather since roughly 400 AD. 16 centuries of monsoon, heat, and now industrial air pollution. It is barely rusted. Ramamurthy Balasubramaniam at IIT Kanpur worked out why. The iron holds close to 1% phosphorus, far more than modern iron, a direct byproduct of the smelting method used. That phosphorus catalyzes a thin, dense protective layer right at the metal surface, which regenerates through Delhi's wet and dry seasons. Rain wets it, sun dries it, the layer reforms. The weather that should destroy it is the weather that maintains it. And the Smiths had no concept of phosphorus because it wouldn't be discovered for another 1,200 years. Verdict: solved. Number 8. Egyptian blue, and this is the one I think is quietly the most remarkable thing on the list. Around 2500 BC, Egyptian craftsmen invented the world's first fully synthetic pigment. Sand, copper, calcium, fused in a kiln inside a temperature window only a couple of 100 degrees wide. Overshoot and it decomposes into useless glass. Undershoot and it never forms. They hit that window reliably at scale for centuries with no thermometers and no concept of chemistry. Then the recipe was lost for over 1,000 years and had to be reverse-engineered by modern chemists. And then in 2009, a team including Janelo Oka AKORC published something nobody expected. Egyptian blue emits an intense glow in the near-infrared. Invisible to human eyes. Completely meaningless to the people who made it. That property is now used as a fingerprint dusting powder that glows in infrared, pulling prints off patterned surfaces where normal powders fail. And it's being explored for biomedical imaging because that wavelength passes through tissue. A pigment invented before the pyramids were finished is in forensics labs right now, useful again for a property its inventors could not perceive. Verdict: solved and still paying out. Number 9. Andean Stonework. Sacsayhuaman, above Cusco, where the Inca built walls from limestone blocks weighing up to 130 tons, fitted so tightly you cannot slide paper between them. No mortar. And Pumapunku in Bolivia at nearly 4,000 meters, with H-shaped andesite blocks cut flat to fractions of a millimeter. You'll hear that modern engineers couldn't replicate this. That's not true, and the real answer is better. Both sites have unfinished blocks lying around, and the quarries are littered with the tools. Rounded hammer stones harder than the blocks used to pound rather than cut. For fitting, the Inca used scribe and fit. Suspend a rough block on ropes over the ones below, mark exactly where it touches, swing it away, pound down the high spots, lower it back, check, repeat. Dozens of times for one block. Puma Punku carbon dates to between 536 and 600 AD, and its blocks were pounded with stone hammers then ground and polished with flat stones and sand. That is not a mystery. That is a horrifying amount of patience. Verdict, solved, and the answer is that 1,000 people did something incredibly boring for a very long time. Number 10. The Voynich Manuscript. Sometime in the early 1400s, somebody wrote a 240-page book in a writing system nobody has ever identified. The vellum carbon dates to between 1404 and 1438. It's full of plants that match no known species, astronomical charts, and for reasons nobody can explain, drawings of women bathing in green pools connected by elaborate plumbing. Every serious codebreaker has tried it. World War II cryptographers, the NSA, modern machine learning. All of them failed. And here's why it won't die: the text behaves like language. Word frequencies follow Zipf's law, the distribution real human languages produce and random gibberish doesn't. The words have consistent prefixes, midfixes, and suffixes. There is structure in there. It sits in Yale's Banek Library, 240 pages of it, and nobody can read a single word. Verdict, still lost. Now here's the uncomfortable part, and it's why I wanted you thinking about that login screen. You probably think this is a problem of antiquity. Ancient people, no writing, secrets dying with individuals. So let's test that against the best documented engineering project in human history. The Saturn V. You've heard that NASA lost the blueprints. That's false, and the truth is worse. Every scrap of documentation survives. When NASA engineers at Marshall went back to study the F-1 engine, the documents were not enough. Each engine was built largely by hand under crushing deadline pressure, and each carried its own undocumented quirks, adjustments a technician made on the floor and never wrote down because at the time it was just Tuesday. The paperwork records what was specified, not what was done. So they took surviving engines apart to reverse engineer their own machine. Within living memory. With full documentation. With the original organization still standing. That is exactly the Damascus Steel story, on the most scrutinized machine ever built. The blacksmith who never wrote down that the ore mattered and the technician who never wrote down the adjustment are the same person. So line them up. Every case we cracked the same way. Roman concrete, the iron pillar, the Damascus nanotubes, the infrared and Egyptian blue. Every single time, somebody finally ran a test for one specific material property nobody had thought to check for decades. The answer was sitting inside the object the whole time, waiting for someone to ask it the right question. And the ones still open aren't open because ancient people had capabilities we can't fathom. Greek fire, the real Damascus process, whatever the Voynich says. They're unsolved for a far more ordinary reason. The one detail that would settle it was never written down, and the person holding it died before anyone thought to ask. Not one of these needed a lost civilization or an outside intervention. All of them needed only the most boring failure our species has. Somebody knew something and nobody wrote it down. So, back to your kitchen, 11 at night, staring at a login you cannot get past. You're not doing anything new. You're the latest version of a pattern that runs through a Byzantine family who kept a formula out of writing on purpose, and a blacksmith in the 1700s who took the real secret of Damascus steel to his grave without ever knowing he had it, because it was the ore, not the technique, and nobody told him. Knowledge has always been one broken link from vanishing. That was true when it lived in one family's memory, and it's true now that it lives on a server in a building you'll never see. We just don't notice until somebody turns up centuries later with an electron microscope, asking a question nobody thought to ask in time.